Salute friends, welcome to another video. Today I'm gonna talk all about the different races in the game in World of Warcraft. And in particular we're gonna look, okay, which races do I think are the best for PvP for hunters in general? Big exclaimer of course at the beginning. If you choose the best PvP race that I will tell you later in this video, usually the choice of race, it doesn't really matter that much, and there are a lot of high rated players that just pick any race that they like to play. So your most important thing is just pick a race that you feel enjoyable to play. But the main thing about this video is I'm gonna talk about everyone who wants to min-max for PvP. If you don't care that much about min-max, just pick a race that you enjoy the looks, the lore for. That's your main priority, because if you choose a race that you don't like the aesthetics from or the lore, at the end, high chance you're gonna just put that character into the freezer or even delete it because you're not happy with it at the end. I'm gonna cover the races in the Horde and also in the Alliance for hunters in general. I think we'll start off with the Horde. And we're gonna start with the Vulpera and just go towards Orc at the end. It doesn't mean like that's the order of from weakest to strongest. And on the Alliance we'll work from Mechagnome all the way to Human. And again, like I'm just going up this list like that. It doesn't mean like Human is the strongest, for example, or Mechagnome is the weakest. Let's start off with the Vulpera on the Horde side. So I'm just gonna give you my honest opinion about the Vulpera and what I think about it for hunters in general. I can tell you, Vulpera is probably not one race that I would pick for hunters in general. You can see the races right there as well. You have Bag of Tricks, fill a trick to harm an enemy or help a friend. It's just too minor to be really helpful in most situations. You also have Nose for Trouble, take less damage the first time you're hit. It's more likely nice if you're running into Demology Warlocks, so all the pests that hit you the first time, you'll take reduced damage. But in general, that's one race that I would pick if I was a tanking spec. Then it would make more sense. And of course you have some fire resistance as well. But it's just really minor and in particular not worth taking. The only reason why you would pick a Vulpera is for that racial Nose for Trouble. But then again, I don't think that's particularly useful for hunters in general. And there are other races on the Horde side that do a much better job for hunters in general with their racials. So Vulpera is not one that I would pick. The Zandalari Troll I think is a really cool looking race, and I think it's also the tallest race in the game. And if you want to go for the tribal vibe, yeah, definitely a cool one to go for aesthetic wise. If we look at the racials, there are a few important ones. You have Regeneration to heal yourself rapidly over a short time. Embrace of the Loa, so you can get either one of 6 boons. And Summon a Parallax to reduce your falling speed. If you're gonna look at the Regeneration, the heal over time, I have to mention that any damage can also be a dot ticking. It will cancel the regeneration. So, and as hunters, we don't have any way anymore to get rid of all dots on us. So it's really hard to get full value out of the heal, because you have a high chance it will be interrupted by any damage in the game. For example, if you fight in a 3v3 arena fight, imagine all the chaos that's going on. It's almost impossible to cast off a regeneration and get the full effect, the full heal from it. So that renders that kind of racial, in my opinion, pretty useless. If we look at Embrace of the Loa, you have 6 boons. It's Embrace of Akunda. Your healing abilities have a chance to heal the target. Embrace of Bonsamli. Your damaging abilities have a chance to deal with shadow damage and heal for 100% of the damage done. Embrace of Gong. Increase your movement speed by 5%. Embrace of Kimball. Your damaging abilities have a chance to cause a target to bleed over 6 seconds. That effect can stack up to 3 times. Embrace of Krakwa. Taking damage has a chance to grant you additional health and 66 armor. And then the last boon, Embrace of Paku. Your abilities have a chance to grant you 4% critical strike for 12 seconds. If we look at the boons in particular, out of the 6, I would say the only valuable one is Embrace of Gong, which increases your movement speed by 5% at all times. That's just passively a great extra buff on yourself to either kite away from your enemy much easier, or either to close the gap towards your enemy easier. The rest of the boons, they trigger too few to actually be useful. So having that always 5% increased movement speed, you get most value out. With the racials for PvP, the Zandalari Troll is not that great, and there are definitely better choices on the Horde side that you will do better with in PvP if you want to go min-max. So I wouldn't also advise Zandalari Troll. The Mighty Mecha Orc. Well, what a great looking race, right? I think this is a cooler version than the regular Orc. If you look at the aesthetic, it's so mean. So what do the Mecha Orcs bring to the table? They have Ancestral Call. They have Savage Blood and Sympathetic Vigor. And of course you have some reduced duration on all poison, disease and curses. But that one is not that really important, and especially because most class can just reapply the dodge very easily. That one you will not notice in PvP at all. Well, the pet health increase from Sympathetic Vigor is nice, and also the DPS gain from Ancestral Call. It is nice. It's a bit random which stat it will give you, but it's really unlikely that those ratios will allow you to win your arena games, for example. We'll look at different ratios on the Horde sides that in my opinion are doing a way better job than the Mecha Orc, even though they look awesome. So the Highmountain Tauren is also a different allied race, you can see. You can also see the racial traits there as well. So you have your Bull Rush, charge forwards, knocking down enemies. You have Rugged Tenacity, reduce damage from incoming attacks. You have increased versatility, a really great stat to increase your damage and reduce the damage you take from enemies in PvP. There are 3 of those racial traits that can influence PvP, which is Bull Rush, a pretty unique one. It's like a stun and also you charge forward. What I've noticed when I tested it out is like whenever a Frost Mage, for example, was slowing me down, and if I Bull Rushed, I would Bull Rush still at full speed. And then after the Bull Rush, I would still have to slow, but it's nice to at least either to stun someone, you can use it to chase someone, and you can use it to try to escape. It can be really fun to use. But is it a really game-breaking one, or one that I think that in PvP is really that valuable? I would say no. The reduced damage from incoming attacks, yes, of course, is always nice. But those ratios from Highmountain Tauren are nothing game-breaking in that kind of way. So I would only say try Highmountain Tauren if you really like the aesthetics, or if you want to fool around with Bull Rush. It can be fun. It can be fun, I can tell you. But then again, there are ratios in this game on Horde size. They are a bit more competitive than Highmountain Tauren. So Highmountain Tauren is one that I would also not advise. Here we have Nightborne. Probably aesthetic-wise is one that I absolutely love for hunters. Just look at this fellow right here on the screen. Is it good for PvP? Well, short answer, absolutely not. This is probably one of the worst races if you want to be min-maxing for PvP, if you look at the ratios. It's the damage and snare nearby allies with Arcane Pulse. The damage is so little, and the snare is also... You already have a lot of snares as hunter with all your traps. So I feel Arcane Pulse is totally unnecessary. Increased magical damage. Well, if you know hunter, most of your damage is physical. So increased magical damage almost does nothing. You have resistance to arcane damage, which can be nice, but then again, it's only good, I think, if for arcane shots from other hunters, for example, to reduce the damage of that one, or from arcane mages. It's not that valuable either. I think Nightborne probably is one of, or if not the worst race to go for if you want to really min-max in PvP, if you look at the ratios. What do the Pandaren have? Well, they can put enemies to sleep with a touch of their hand. It's an ability called Quaking Palm. Increased benefits from eating food. I think the effects are too minimal to be very impactful in PvP. Take less fall damage. It can sometimes save you as well. How often do you have that situation that you would die from fall damage? Then you have to be pretty unlucky. And I think in PvP most people run now with Goblin Gliders anyway. But I have to tell you, Quaking Palm is on the same diminishing return as Freezing Trap and Scatter Shot. And because of that, it will be rarely useful. So what I like to do, you scatter shot someone first, then land a freezing trap on them. If you would do then, for example, on the same target, if he would come close to you again with a closing gap ability, and you would use Quaking Palm, because you already had a freezing trap on them, the duration of Quaking Palm, because of the diminishing return, will actually be reduced than what it says in the tooltip. So that makes Pandaren for me also a race I would not advise you to pick for PvP if you want to min-max. On to the mean little goblins. If you look at the racial traits, Rocket Jump is a really neat ability. It allows you to either kite away or to chase your enemy. Be careful, after you've used Rocket Jump, I think for an X amount of seconds, the game will not allow you to use any items that reduce falling speed. For example, if you Rocket Jump and you want to use a parachute cloak afterwards, you can't immediately do that. So you have to be careful that you don't jump off a cliff, because then you don't have time enough to use any fail-safe device. Haste increased. It is pretty nice, but not massively for PvP. Alchemy skill and potion healing increased. That can be nice if you do non-rated PvP, because then if you use a healing potion, the health you get back, you'll be healed by a bigger portion in comparison to other ratios. But then again, that only works for non-rated PvP environments. So in arenas or rated battlegrounds, or Battleground Blitz, that one is useless. I do think there's a better race for the Horde side. The High Blood Elves of Quelf for last. So what do they have now? Restore resources like mana or energy, and you can dispel nearby enemies with Arcane Torrent. So Arcane Torrent gives you a little bit of resources back. It can dispel an enemy. So for example, when you have a paladin who presses that bubble, you have a chance that you can dispel the bubble. I found out that in PvP, Arcane Torrent is really unpredictable and really unreliable. More randomly, just getting rid of probably a minor buff instead of the paladin's bubble, for example, or a mage's shield. Blood Elf is not one that I would recommend. Before, of course, Arcane Torrent was reworked, it would actually silence your enemy. That was massive for PvP, but since they reworked that, to only dispel a buff from your enemy, it lost a lot of value, and that's why at this time I will not recommend you to play Blood Elf if you want to min-max in PvP. One of the cooler looking racials on the Horde side has to be Troll. Let's break down their traits. So they have Berserk, increasing attack speed and casting speed. They have Regeneration, which allows like a portion of their health to be regenerated back in combat, but that's too little to be valuable. And you have Voodoo Shuffle, reduce the duration of movement and pairing effects. That can be nice as well, but beware, you already have an ability to get rid of movement and pairing effects. You have already your Disengage, who does what does the same in a pretty short cooldown. And of course you have Master Skull if you have a Cunning pet, which of course gives you an immunity of 4 seconds, I believe, for movement and pairing effects. So that renders the Voodoo Shuffle a little bit useless, or it's nice to have, but I'd rather have something else. Berserking can be nice as well to increase your attack speed. You can easily macro it into your full burst rotation without you having to press any extra button. So it's a nice way to beef up your burst. But then again, there is one race on the Horde that does a better job with racials than the Troll, the almighty Tauren. So if we look at the racials, they have a few things going for them, of course. So they can stomp their enemies with War Stomp. They have increased stamina with Brawn. And you have increased effects from critical strikes. So the increased effects from critical strikes, that can be nice as well, to beef up your damage by a little. But then again, the damage output at the end is not going to be really significantly different from all the other racials that we already talked about till this point. The main reason, if you would ask me why you would want to pick a Tauren, would be War Stomp. Briefly stun your opponent, but it has a little cast time as well. Sometimes as a hunter can be awkward to use, because you might think you want to use it and then trap someone easily, right? Try to do that and it's pretty clunky to do. And we already have other ways to easily land traps with Scatter Shot and then send a trap down range. But for min-maxing in PvP, Tauren again is a race I would say no towards. But what about PvP for Undead? So they have a few racial traits. They have Will of the Forsaken, which removes Charm, Fear and Sleep effects. Cannibalize is useless. It's really hard to use in arenas. Impossible. It's not even necessary. In rated battlegrounds, you can use it to quickly gain back health. If, for example, you don't have a healer close by and you just took massive damage from someone, but you were able to kill him, then you can absolutely use Cannibalize to get some health back. So that can be nice. But then again, if you have a mage in your team, you can give your mage food. It already renders Cannibalize worthless, right? You have Touch of the Grave, which can drain health from enemies. Even for ranged classes, that works. The main thing why you want to play Undead is for Will of the Forsaken. Can be good in certain matchup against fear classes. I can tell you out of experience, being able to break fears isn't as essential as a hunter, because I would rather have something to get out of stuns. Because if you play hunter, you know one of our biggest weaknesses is dying in stuns. I'd rather pick something else than Undead. A face-off against a lot of class that can fear you, it can help, but there's another massive disadvantage about Undead if you look at the Will of the Forsaken. The Will of the Forsaken does share a 30-second cooldown with your Gladiator's medallion, like your PvP trinket. So whenever you've used Will of the Forsaken, you can't use your PvP trinkets for the next 30 seconds. That's one thing that you really have to pay attention for, and that can be the difference between life and death. It just is really simple. If you can play Orc for Hunter, you should do it if you really want to min-max. But if you care about aesthetics more and you don't like Orcs, feel free to choose something else, because the aesthetics is the most important. Because otherwise, eventually you're gonna ditch the character for sure. If you don't care about that and only want to min-max, like I do, you have to pick Orc on the Horde side. It's just so great. Let me explain you why. You have Blood Fury, which increases your damage. You have Hardiness, so you get some resistance to stun effects. And you have Command, which makes sure the damage done by your pets is increased. The ratio that makes this one the most powerful on the Horde side, and maybe even the most powerful in the game, it has to be Hardiness. Arguably the best ratio in the game for Arena for sure. Most classes and comps will aim to kill you in a stun. And remember, we die in stuns pretty easily as hunters. This is massive. It reduces the duration of all stuns, making it more likely you will narrowly survive and still be able to use your defensive, like your Aspect of the Turtle or your Feign Death. Particularly in situations like a Subtlety Rogue. Being an Orc can make you a non-viable kill target, because they will not be able to apply the second and third cheap shot and while still using their damage rotation. Because as an Orc you get out of the stun quicker. A Rogue has a way harder time to kill you in a stun. Because you come out of every stun he applies to you, you get out of it faster. Massive, massive game changer for the Orc right there. Blood Fury is also a really good ratio, because you can macro it in with your burst abilities. And that makes sure you apply Blood Fury without having to press any extra button. Your rotation still stays the same. Command is a passive damage increase to your pets, which is nice to have, but in situations where you don't use a pet, for example as a Marshal Hunter, if you don't use a pet, you lose value with that one. Although it is not what makes Orc the best race, because that goes hands down to hardness. And that's why Orc is my top pick for Horde. But let's go quickly look at the Alliance, because they also have some good stuff. And I think at the end of this video, I'll make a quick summary again of what I would rate your go-to picks for both Horde and Alliance. Before we go to the Alliance, guys, I quickly want to ask you for a favor. If you enjoyed this video so far and you found already some value, and if you want to support me, maybe consider dropping a like for me on this video. That kind of shows me if I'm doing a good job and if you like the content or not. And maybe while you're at that, check out my YouTube channel, YouTube at Commander. I'll make some older edited PvP videos, some PvP guide videos, and some general tutorials about World of Warcraft. I'm a pretty small channel, so if you would help me out by subscribing, for example, you would massively help me out. And that makes sure that I can keep producing these kind of videos for you guys in the future. So I want to thank you already for dropping a like and maybe consider subscribing. And let's go to the Alliance, guys. So we're going to start with Mechagnome and work our way up to Human. That doesn't mean like that's the order from worst on the Alliance to the best on the Alliance. The Mechagnome has a few races as well. You can summon duplicates to confuse your foes. It sounds cool, but in PvP it's really hard to trick people in that. You also have combat analysis, increased in strength as you fight an enemy. That one is absolutely a really great damage increase. If you, for example, if you would target a training dummy for a few minutes and compare the damage from Mechagnome to another race, you'll notice some difference. So the longer the fight lasts, the stronger Mechagnomes get in damage wise. The emergency failsafe heal automatically when you're badly injured. So I think that it triggers roughly, I think, when you're at 20% health. It will give you some nice health back, like kind of like a cheat death from rogues, but then a weaker version, I would say. It can occasionally save you. I think Mechagnome is a pretty decent one, but there are absolutely better races on the Alliance side. So what do the Kul Tiran have for hunters, you would ask? Alright. We can look at all the racials. A really important one is Haymaker. Smash your opponent, stunning and knocking them back. Can be nice. Kind of like PvP environments where you have kind of like different levels. You have some arena fights as well that have it. You can actually knock someone off that platform and then they have to go walk around to get back towards you. In battlegrounds you can absolutely knock someone off a cliff and hopefully they can die. It's really hilarious. You can do some fun stuff with this. Really enjoyable if you want to fool around. Haymaker you can also use to finish kills. You can use it, for example, when your enemy's low health to smash them away. They'll be stunned. And in the meantime, you can cast, for example, a sniper shot, which deals a percentage of their HP and damage. That can be really nice to kind of make a guaranteed kill on the target, so he can't use any defensives if he doesn't have a trinket anymore. You have brush it off as well. Increase the versatility, you heal a portion of the damage you take. Again, I think it's too minor to be very, very useful. So if you want to play a big beefy human and you want to have some fun with Haymaker, knocking people off cliffs, making sure you can get guaranteed kill by stunning them and then executing with a sniper shot, for example, then definitely go for Kul Tiran. I'm pretty sure you'll have a blast just by the fun that Haymaker gives you. But for very, very competitive PvP, there are better races. If you've been following my channel, you've probably seen that I've played Dark Iron Dwarf for quite a long time. And there's a good reason for it. They are one of the best races for PvP for hunters. So you have a few effects and the most important one is Fireblood. Remove harmful effects to empower you in scenarios or in patches in the game or expansions where the dot classes are the meta. The more dot classes you face, for example, Assassination Rogues, Feral Druid, Unholy Death Knights, they're very dot heavy reliant to do their most damage and burst damage. If those classes are the meta, Dark Iron Dwarf can become even the best race for PvP for hunters. It's absolutely insane. And I have some clips as well. I might play one right here where I fight against a feral druid, where he applied all the dots, was going to burst. I cleansed it all off of me. And because this racial, whenever you clean off or you clear off a dot, you also get primary stat. You'll get agility in this case back. And agility increases your damage. The amount of agility you can get from Fireblood can absolutely go through the roof. And you'll definitely notice the damage increase when you press that ability. Especially if you can combine it with your older hunter spec burst, like Bestial Wrath or Coordinate Assault. You'll do massive damage if you can combine it with Fireblood and if you purge off a lot of effects. Mage freezes you in place. Fireblood can also remove that because it's seen as a magical effect as well. You can kind of see why I'm really excited about Dark Iron Dwarfs. Fireblood is absolutely a game changer if you are fighting in a current patch or expansion where dot classes are becoming the meta. The more dot classes there are that are in the meta, the more value you get out of Dark Iron Dwarfs, and can even be, in my opinion, in those cases, the best race for PvP for hunters. Fireblood does share a 30-second cooldown with your PvP trinket. So whenever you've used Fireblood, you can't use your Freedom trinket to get out of stuns for 30 seconds. Beware of that. Really great choice, Dark Iron Dwarf hunter. I can advise this to anyone. Any given time is a really strong one for hunters. The Lightforged Dranei. If we look at PvP, they have a few things. They have Light Judgments, deal mighty holy damage to an area. I think for PvP, like, it's not something you should go for. You'll get too less value out of it, and there are just plain better racials in the game on the Alliance side. You also have Light's Reckoning, like Erupt Upon Death, damaging nearby enemies and healing nearby allies. Again, then you're already dead. That's not what you want. And in arenas, that's in particular especially useless. I think on the Alliance side, I think Lightforged Dranei might be the worst, or one of the worst races to pick if you want to do very serious min-maxing in PvP. Void Elf Hunters. The first one, Spatial Rift. Teleport through a rift in space. So the first time you press them, you'll shoot out like kind of like a shadow trail in front of you where you're facing towards. And if you press the ability again, I think within a certain amount of seconds, you'll be teleported to that smoke or shadow flare, whatever it is. It can be very useful to guide people, but also what I've known what you can do with it, which is kind of hilarious too if you want to do some fun stuff in battlegrounds, for example. You can actually troll people with it. Or especially in the open world. If, for example, you're being chased by an enemy or multiple enemies and you're pretty sure you're gonna die, run towards a cliff. Before you jump off the cliff, you face around to your enemy, you press Spatial Rift so it shoots out that shadow thing towards your enemy, still above on the cliff. You jump off the cliff. When you're falling, you have to be pretty quickly to press that ability again. If you time everything right and your enemy is falling for it, he'll also jump off the cliff to go towards you with maybe a Goblin Glide or whatever. But then you'll be teleported back on the cliff and you can freely escape. You have Entropic Embrace, so you can become empowered by the Void, which increases your damage by a certain amount of seconds. That can be really nice when you're bursting. That can be nice if it aligns perfectly. Also another one that I think is pretty good as well is Eternal Calm, which makes sure that your spell casts aren't delayed by damage. This, I think, is only very usable if you're playing Marksmanship Hunter, because your aim shots and your sniper shots have a cast time. The older Hunter specs have a lot of instant cast spells, so you don't have to line them up like a normal caster would. This one makes sure if you're, for example, playing Marksmanship Hunter and you have a pesky melee bullying you, normally if they attack you, you have the little spell pushback. A little delay on your cast bar. With Void Elves, you don't have that. In general, Void Elves are really great for casters for that reason. If you plan to play Marksmanship Hunter only, that's already a pretty good benefit for you. It has some good guiding potential, some juking potential in PvP. It's not a bad choice at all. You can do well within PvP. In comparison to other races, for example, the Dark Iron Dwarfs that we already covered, Void Elves can't match that if you want to min-max. On Alliance you can also play Pandaren, but as I already mentioned on the Horde side, Pandaren is not a race I would go for, purely because the Quaking Palm has a diminishing return, which she has with Freezing Trap and Scatter Shot. And those are your main ways to do CC as a hunter. And that makes your Quaking Palm loses all of its value. I would never choose Pandaren just for that reason. Worgen, aesthetically, I absolutely love them. Absolutely love them. But if we look at PvP, it's a whole different story. Because I will explain you. They have a few ratios. So you have Dark Flight. Periodically move quicker. As a hunter, that's totally not necessary because you already have other ways to increase your movement speed with disengage, or for example, aspect of the cheetah. To have another one that can be nice, but in PvP, the value you get out of this is so minimum. I render it completely useless. For PvP, I think the Worgen on the Alliance, I think is the worst race on the Alliance side. I would never choose Worgen. Onto the normal Dranei. If you look at the racial traits, Gifts of the Narrow, heal yourself or others over time. I think practical wise, Gift of the Narrow doesn't do enough healing to be worth it. So there are definitely better picks. You have Heroic Presence, increased agility, intellect and strength. Little minor, you shouldn't pick it based off that. For min-maxing, there are other better ones out there. My little friend, the Gnome. So in PvP, they have a few things. Your main important one is Escape Artist. So what is great, so once a minute, you can get rid of movement impairing effects, which can be really awesome. And also another thing, Escape Artist doesn't share a cooldown with your PvP trinkets. So if you use Escape Artist directly after, if you're getting stunned, for example, you also can get rid of the stun. That's really awesome. Like that small thing can already make a huge difference in PvP. So you would really only pick Gnome to get rid of movement impairing effects, either escaping more or chasing down your enemies more. However, your disengage does the same thing. I think Gnomes is pretty decent, but there are definitely better picks. The Dark Iron Dwarf, for example, we already mentioned, is already much better. And there are some other great options too, which we'll also cover. The elusive Night Elves. In my opinion, Night Elves, I think for Alliance, are the best race for PvP in the entire game because of one ability, Shadow Melt. It allows you to fade into the shadows, which you can use in PvP. You have some great things with that, what you can do with it and why it makes it so strong. For example, you can use Shadow Melt to completely negate any projectile that has been cast on you. For example, if a warrior casts a Stormbolt on you, it will travel through the air. You can Shadow Melt while still flying through the air. Before the Stormbolt hits you, you press Shadow Melt and the Stormbolt will miss. You can do the same with heavy hitting abilities. For example, a Chaos Bolt. You can Shadow Melt a Chaos Bolt and it will do 0 damage. It will just misses. You can also do the same, but it's really hard. For example, instant cast spells. Like for example, your Shadow Melt can completely negate any instant spell. Like for example, Kidney Shot. If your timing is absolutely perfect. But that's the thing with those instant kind of spells, like Kidney Shot, very hard to pull off. Very, very, very hard. And only a few people in the world probably that can pull that off. Whenever you have projectiles coming for you, you can Shadow Melt them. They'll do no damage. I might even show a clip on the background where you can see me just Shadow Melting an ability and then you can see the power of it. Also, what I really like to do with Shadow Melt, if you have some, for example, some battlegrounds, some rated battlegrounds or normal battlegrounds, and you have those objectives where someone has to defend, as a Night Elf Hunter, you can go into camouflage, lay down all your traps. Whenever your camouflage is about to be over, you can Shadow Melt in place, wait a minute, and then you can use camouflage again to wander around again. So I always like to say that as a Night Elf Hunter, you can play like a rogue with a bow. Really, really fun to play with, and it gives you a lot of utility. I absolutely love Night Elves for that reason alone already. So many times I've sat on a base completely in Shadow Melt and a person tries to capture it and I'll just open up fire and obliterate them. Great racial. Absolute fun. Also, what Shadow Melt can be used for is to drop you out of combat instantly. For example, if your Feign Death is on cooldown but you wanna camouflage but you're still in combat, instead of Feign Death camouflage, what you normally do, you can also do Shadow Melt camouflage, because Shadow Melt will instantly get you out of combat too. And also you have elusiveness, so you're more difficult to hit, so you have a higher dodge chance. So defensive wise, it's already an upgrade as well. Really nice. Will probably not make a difference, but it's nice to have. The main reason why you play Night Elves is Shadow Melt is just broken in PvP. And that's also why I am playing a Night Elf Hunter myself at this moment. In general, Shadow Melt really complements classes that can go stealth big time. And Hunter with Camouflage is one of them too. That's why I really love Night Elves and I think it's the absolute best on the Alliance. It's highly skill involved, and if you can't time it right, lose a lot of value. So if you want something that's easier to play very high PvP rating with min-maxing, there is another option. The regular Dwarf. The regular Dwarf in PvP is also a really solid choice. Have the ability Stone Form. You may take on a stone form, which of course gets rid of bleed effects as well and poison effects. And also gives you like a kind of like an damage reduction part on it. And it also does share a 30-second cooldown with your PvP trinket, so beware with that. So it is kind of similar to the Dark Iron Dwarf's Fireblood. So you can completely ignore their burst as a regular dwarf as well. However, if you dispel all the dots, you already take down that damage massively, right? So why do you need to further reduce the damage they'll deal to you? Fireblood does the same, gets rid of all those dots and magic effects. So you take away the most dangerous part, for example, from an Assassination Rogue's burst, and you convert all those debuffs into a buff, a huge agility buff for yourself. So then you can absolutely turn the tables on the rogue and absolutely nuke him. That's probably why I will advise to you, if you're into the dwarf races, you like them both, but you also want to min-max, and if you doubt between dwarf or Dark Iron Dwarf, go Dark Iron Dwarf, because in my opinion they're stronger, just because it gets rid of all the dots and magic effects and gives you a huge damage boost as well. The regular dwarves have Might of the Mountain, increased effect from critical strikes, can be nice but nothing game breaking. So dwarf is a pretty decent pick as well, but if you're into the dwarf races, the Dark Iron Dwarf is a much better pick, and I think the Dark Iron Dwarf, as I mentioned before, can become the best race, depending on like if a lot of dot classes are in the meta or not. But Dark Iron Dwarf is already better, and Night Elf still takes the crown for me. And the humans, I think in PvP is probably the easiest race to pick. It's like you can almost never go wrong with picking a human for min-maxing in PvP. That's just because the Will to Survive, which allows you to break out of stun effect, it's just so easy to use. It's really hard to mess that up, for example, over the Night Elf racial Shadow Melt, and you always get value out of it. You also have the Human Spirit, increases haste, critical strike, mastery and versatility. That was actually a pretty nice passive secondary stat boost, which you'll definitely notice when you are maxing out your character's gear. Again, a really great racial. But you mainly do it for the increased secondary stats, but massively for the Will to Survive to break out of stun effect. Why is it so great? Well, because you have the Will to Survive, there's like a 3-minute cooldown, which allows you to free up a PvP trinket slot. So what you can do then, instead of getting the Freedom trinket that can get you out of roots and out of stuns, you can play, for example, with a double DPS trinket. Also, you can also swap out one of the offensive trinkets for a defensive one to increase, for example, the heal of your acceleration further. So human just is great because it just frees up a PvP trinket slot for you to run with something else than the Freedom trinket. The only downside I would say with the Will to Survive for the humans, you can only use it on stuns. So you can't use it on fears, you can't use it on when you're incapacitated or anything. It only works for stuns. If you're fighting against specs or compositions that have other means of applying CC to you than stuns, it might still be viable for you to run with a Freedom trinket instead than a double DPS trinket or another defensive trinket. I think human is probably for Alliance the second best race. Second best after, I think, Night Elf, and I think the third best on Alliance is of course the Dark Iron Dwarf, but that can become the first one. If you have a lot of dot classes in PvP that are meta, then Dark Iron Dwarf can become the best race in PvP. For me, for Alliance, I would say Night Elf, then I would say human, then I would say Dark Iron Dwarf. And that will be it for this video, guys. A quick summary again of what we talked about before. The best races for Horde, for example, there's only one clear winner is Orc because of the hardness stun reduction. It's so valuable in PvP. None other race on the Horde can beat that if you want to min-max. On the Alliance though, it's a bit different. I think the best on Alliance is Night Elf. Shadow Melt is just so valuable. High skilled indeed. But you can play as a rogue, but then with a bow, on objective gameplay as well. It's already really fun. And you can just use it to dodge incoming projectiles, stuns, massive damage abilities like Chaos Bolt, sniper shots. A lot of fun, highly skilled. But I think for Alliance, Night Elf takes the crown. Close second place goes to human. To break out of stuns with Will to Survive is just so great. It frees up a PvP trinket slot, so you can play double DPS trinkets or one DPS and a defensive trinket. And also the increased secondary stats when you're massively geared out, maximum geared out, you'll definitely notice it. And with human the things in PvP, you can never go wrong. So that's why I give it a solid second place. Third place on the Alliance I have to give to Dark Iron Dwarves. Fireblood can be game breaking if you're playing against Feral Druids, Assassination Rogues, Unholy Death Knights, dot heavy classes that rely on the dots to do damage and their burst. You can deny the whole burst with that ability and just turn it into a massive agility increase for yourself to pump out some serious damage afterwards to annihilate them. So Dark Iron Dwarf I would put it on third place for that reason, but when the meta becomes very heavy dot class orientated or dot specs, it can become the first place in raids for the Alliance. General thing, the Alliance has 3 great options and the Horde, yeah, you only have one if you really want to min-max. Min-maxing doesn't really matter that much in difference. You can play well, high rated with any race in the game. So your first pick should be which race do you really like the aesthetics, the lore and the animations of. That should be your primary case on selecting which race you want to play as Hunter. Because if you play a race that you hate the looks or aesthetics or the lores from, I can guarantee eventually you'll ditch that character. I'll leave it all down into the description as well, so you can just read what I've been mentioning, my top picks for Horde and Alliance. And while you're at it there, like maybe drop a like on this video as well. It would massively help me out, showing that if you enjoy the content. And maybe check out my YouTube channel as well, YouTube at Commander. I make some PvP edited videos there too, some PvP guides and some general World of Warcraft tutorials. So check it out. If you like what you see on my channel, consider subscribing. As a small channel that will massively help me out. You'll support me so I can create more videos like these for you guys in the future as well. So I already want to thank you a lot for doing so. And that was it for this video. I hope it was useful for you guys. This was Commander and I'll see you on the next battle. Salute!